All right, Justin Botillier, CEO of Calyx CPA here today with a couple people from the Psychedelic Pharmacists Association based out of, is it out of Colorado or where are you guys based out of? Sorry.
I'm based out of San Mateo, California, right around the Bay Area.
Yeah, and so we've got Colby Burns and Kevin Lanzo right now. Kevin Lanzo is a founding member, former president, and now on the board of directors. And then Colby Burns is now acting executive director. Would that be the correct term or president?
President.
President.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that, but the titles matter. But thank you for joining me today. And the reason why I reached out was because I found just the information that you're trying to get out to be intriguing, and the fact that pharmacists is in the name, which kind of is a little bit of a different perspective than the organizations that I'm currently working with. So right now we're working with the first service centers in the regulated market here in Oregon, and then there's now a Colorado regulated program, and people are rapidly coming on board there. And so I wanted to see what your take was maybe regarding that. But first, let me go ahead and take some time to introduce your organization.
Sure. Colby, you want to get started?
Sure. So we are a nonprofit organization that really our mission is to, and mentioned we had talked about bridging the gap between plant-based medicine, or maybe more, say, Eastern medicine and then Western medicine approaches, trying to kind of make psychedelic medicine something that's the medical community is comfortable with discussing. We're providing educational resources to doctors, PAs, nurses, as well as therapists, clinicians who are currently working with these products. So that is a big part of our mission, and then advocating for policy changes that might lead to the advancement of psychedelics as a therapeutic option. We do see the therapeutic potential of psychedelic medicines, and we'll perhaps get into some challenges and opportunities in that space and how it intersects with traditional healthcare. But that really is, to me, the focus of the organization, is bringing more thought leaders, key opinion leaders, and people in the healthcare side of things into this space where traditionally maybe there's been some hesitation or reluctance to get involved because of federal laws and statutes that kind of kept this underground. Not to say the great work people have done in the underground setting, but
Yeah. So when you said that people who are already in the industry, these healthcare practitioners, are you speaking about ketamine specifically? Because ketamine is currently able to be prescribed and is, as far as I understand, the only psychedelic that can be at this time.
yeah, great question. Ketamine, true, is the only psychedelic that I suppose is not a Schedule One substance at this time. It is able to be prescribed and administered in licensed settings. You mentioned Oregon and Colorado are moving forward with these state-specific approaches and regulated service centers. So that might fit inside the bubble as well. But there are also people that are unlicensed that practice with these medicines as well in the gray market.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a robust, yeah, with all psychedelics, there are people who believe that each modality has a benefit. And so each one of them can be used to benefit society as a whole and heal. Yeah, I'm curious because there's all sorts of corporations. This is actually not a question I sent to you. Now I'm going to go off. There's a lot of pharmaceutical companies investing in these medicines, doing research like MDMA and LSD and psilocybin they all have some sort of investment going on to kind of like, in a way, like from what I can tell, be some of the first to market in terms of like legitimate like Schedule 3 substances, little like ketamine. My experience in the current regulated market is that people do not come back after they have had their psilocybin session. Sometimes they might come back, but they typically are not repeat users like other pharmaceuticals. And so if you've got people who are doing, what is it that they're trying to do? Because I'm
Mhm.
just curious, what is it that these companies, if I don't know if I'm being off the cuff here, I'm just
Well,
making.
I know what you're talking about, Justin, and I could definitely help here. So, in addition to being one of the founders of the Psychedelic Pharmacists Association, I work in the pharmaceutical industry, in the psychedelic industry specifically. I'm a consultant. I work for some of these companies that are doing these bids for creating novel psychedelics or existing psychedelics into products that can go through the FDA pathway. So, I can shed some light here. And yeah, I would say the frequency of the dose is just one metric that these companies can manipulate, right, in the productization of psychedelics. Sure, for treatment of resistant depression, like what Compass Pathways is going for psilocybin, or their patented form of psilocybin, it may only take a few doses, 2 or 3 doses, for someone to get into remission. And perhaps that they can be maintained in that way for 6 months, 9 months, a year, maybe indefinitely. But the idea is that if somebody is prone to depression, they may have another episode later down the line. And then they can come back and be treated in a sort of episodic manner in a similar way that we use antibiotics today. I think that's a pretty good model to think about it. You might have an infection of strep throat and you clear it up with some antibiotics, but maybe you get it again in 5 years. You come back, you get another course, you go, you leave. This is the idealistic model that some of these founders have. So that's one avenue. And then if you have more of a shorter acting psychedelic, like a 5-MeO DMT or an NDMT, it may not be curative in the same way. And you may have a recurring model similar to ketamine, where patients might go in every month to have a session, visionary session, where they have a refresh of the lessons, and maybe after 6 sessions, they don't need it anymore. It's an on and off kind of thing. So these are just some models to think about.
Yeah, that's interesting. And maybe I know that there is an attempt to also take the benefits, but without the hallucinations, I guess you could
Hmm.
say. And I or like maybe there's something that can be like an enhanced microdosing experience where you don't
Mhm.
you can take it and you can go about your day and you're not getting too high. So that's interesting. Okay, thanks for deviating from
Oh,
me because I was just talking to somebody who's going to get licensed in the state of Colorado, and he was asking me about the market in Oregon, and I was trying to describe to him what is happening here in Oregon in terms of there's not a gold rush here. There's not like this industry is not a way to get rich in any
mm,
way. And it may be that we're early adopters, I guess you could say, and there hasn't been that critical mass. There is sometimes like my clients talk to me about like how there's a rush after media attention. Like there's some
yeah.
media attention, and then it's, oh, what are these? And then there's a big waiting list. And then soon that waiting list goes down, it shrinks and then pretty soon there's gaps. And then they're like,
Yeah.
whoa, what happened? Had all this buzz, all these people showed up. They have these experiences they say it's the best experience that they've had since the birth of their child.
Hmm.
And then they're like,
Um,
okay, see you later. I'm feeling great. I'm healed. Like I'm out of here. And they don't come back for a while, but then it gets quiet and it's not an easy business. So I wonder like what the pharmaceutical companies have in store for making money, which I would assume they're very profit motivated.
we can talk about that in a lot of so much detail, and maybe another conversation we could
Yeah,
go into industry talk.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. Do you guys have any things that you want to throw out before I jump into a question?
Yeah, we could say a few more things. Maybe, Colby, I could just talk a little bit about some of our committees and then hand it back to you
Yeah.
for some other initiatives. Yeah, some things we just wanted to let your audience know a bit more about what we're doing. So just as Colby said, we have some key pillars in Psychedelic Pharmacists Association of education and advocacy. And the advocacy side of things, I think, is definitely key for your audience of lawyers. So we really see that there's a dearth of policies around providing access to psychedelics, and even people in high up political spaces that know enough detail to actually write good policies. We've seen so many state legislations go up for discussion at the congressional or Senate level and fail, right? And oftentimes this is because they're so complex, like weaving into the medical system, deciding like who's going to be dispensing the medication, the psilocybin, what's the training look like? What are the requirements for the training? Anyway, just to say that in the PPA, we recognize these challenges. We're trying to become available for consulting with the political personnel that are actively writing these bills and the federal government as well in rescheduling efforts. And in our policy and advocacy committee, we recently submitted statements to this request for information that a caucus specializing in psychedelic medicines, as it's called, the PATH caucus, the psychedelics. Oh gosh. Yeah, Colby, I might have
Psychedelics Advancing Therapies, I think. Yeah.
something around that. And anyway, so they asked a whole list of questions about how to integrate psychedelics into the medical system. This was like a 10-page document of questions, and we submitted a lot of responses specific to pharmacists and how we see medicine. That's just one way that we're trying to make a contribution.
Is that document, was that collaborated with someone, or was that something that you produced?
The questions was sent out on a wide base to many different organizations. And so you can find other responses to this request for information on the internet, and some other notable organizations have released them. But for our answer for our organization, we just replied for our membership, our board members, and our advisors. We consulted all of those individuals.
Okay, okay. I'm not very privy to the lobbying formalities in terms of the steps that go into these kinds of actions. I really need to be, though.
Yeah.
I just get told, hey, support this bill. And then I'm like, sign me up. I'll write a letter. I like it. Let's do it. So yeah, you mentioned like getting this medicine accepted into traditional medicine, essentially. And that's like my first question. Like, what challenges do psychedelics face in establishing legitimacy and acceptance within traditional medicine?
I think that you hit on a good one with the profit motive. Obviously, we could have a larger discussion like that. What Kevin said, I did hold my tongue. I know some people who do think that there's an effort by big pharma to keep these drugs out because does threaten their model of SSRIs and SNRIs and daily antidepressants that one needs to take to control their symptoms. But aside from that, I think that there is a lot of stigma, just like with cannabis. We've seen that these drugs since the 1970s have been considered Schedule 1 or federally legal, which has made it hard. There has been a lot of research that has gone on despite that. Rick Doblin founded an organization called the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, or MAPS, in the 80s after MDMA went Schedule 1. And they have contributed to a great deal of research in spite of the barriers to access that they've had to overcome. But being that there might be a perception that there's not much research or it's not very high quality research, I think that is a limitation. A lot of these were maybe more passion projects that didn't have a big funding of a big pharma organization. So having to bootstrap and shoestring things together, maybe they didn't follow all the steps that a formal big pharma trial would follow. And we did see some of that with what happened with MAPS, now called Lykos Therapeutics, but their submission of MDMA for PTSD ran into some issues with the way they conducted the trials there. So anytime you don't, I think, have a great deal of the money and expertise maybe that comes into running a large trial, that's difficult. And then getting more education. We mentioned education as one of our pillars, but it's hard to advance and get to key opinion leaders when they don't know they don't know much about these substances. It's not a part of medical school curriculum, pharmacy school curriculum, nursing curriculum, PA curriculum. I really never heard of ibogaine, for example, at all until 2 years ago. What in the world is ibogaine?
Yeah, me too.
All of a sudden, it's this thing that now, if you're in the know, you're hearing about. But I think the layperson still has very little perception of and even a doctor who's practicing medicine probably knows very little about ibogaine. So it's not just a layperson
Yeah, we're learning a lot. Like I'm learning tons. Yeah. Kevin, did you want to chime in on that question about like profit motive? And I'm curious because I don't like
Yeah.
to assume that what I hear is the truth necessarily. So I'm always looking for the other
Mm.
side of the story.
I would say, I mean, there's always conspiracy theories about this kind of thing, right? But speaking from somebody who's in the psychiatry industry, who is talking to key development players at a number of these big companies who are both in charge of maintaining the old drugs' relevancy while also researching new drugs, I can confidently tell you that nobody's attached to maintaining SSRIs as the dominant treatment for mental health. It's just that they've become ingrained into the medical system in such a way that formularies in hospitals, when they decide what treatment for each illness they're going to use, they go with the cheapest one available in order to maintain profit margins on a local level. And to significantly raise that to be more effective is like a really complex endeavor that requires a lot of research. So that's what we're trying to do. These companies, not just psychedelic companies, but novel psychiatry companies as well, prove novel antidepressants, antipsychotics are capable of meeting that higher bill. Anyway, in summary, there, I would say that people want new treatments to happen. It's just that it takes 10 years, really, from the idea of a new treatment in humans to it being like ready to go, deployed, and even then, even longer until it's actually on the Medicare's formulary. That can be like a 15, 20-year process,
Yeah.
uh, which is awful.
And there's been a medical program for cannabis for 26 years or something like that. 28, 30, maybe almost 30
Nice
years.
memory.
We still can't get banking. Okay. But
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, empirical research, it's difficult. Back in the day when they were doing studies, they'd put people in like a sterile white room and then give them LSD and then tie them down or whatever. And then they're like, okay, let's see what the benefit of that. So obviously set and setting is really a huge thing. And that's what's interesting is like, how do we bridge the gap between what can be answered empirically and the aspects of the healing process that cannot be measured through traditional scientific methods? I don't know if that's a mouthful, but you guys want to speak?
Yeah. Oh, sorry to cut you off.
You go ahead. You go ahead,
It's
Colby.
it's a good point. There is some sort of this ineffable quality of some of these agents that there are the experiences that can't easily be quantified, that are maybe highly individualized. And in terms of accounting for that and tracking for that, maybe I'll let Kevin explain a little more. But I do think that is a challenge, and some see there's a real spiritual component to these drugs. I'm a little bit more of a scientist myself, and I think that there's a spiritual component to medicine that we often overlook and was missing from Western medicine, where it's very much we made it a in and out approach. You go to the doctor, here's a problem list, here's your prescriptions you need, we did a physical exam, and you're out of there. And there's very little discussion of what's really going on in your life. Like, yes, we know we can measure these labs showing that things are not going well in terms of your diabetes or metabolic health, but like, why? It's more than just genetics. There's some kind of block that's preventing you from, I think, living a healthy life. And maybe there's social factors in terms of how food is very expensive, but we could talk about that longer. But I'll let Kevin jump in to answer the rest.
Yeah, you brought up some really important points there, Colby, about the whole person. But I'll focus first about the measurement of these ineffable qualities of the experience, right? There's a whole discipline in research about how do you measure experience, which is called phenomenology. And I would say definitely psychedelic research has taken a page out of that book in trying to quantify what about an experience is a quality thing. In the early John Hopkins studies, you had these mystical experience questionnaires. Did somebody feel more connected to God? That they were dissolved into oceanic boundlessness. And the idea in those studies was that the more intense a person's mystical experience, the more likely they were to have effects on their depression or PTSD or what have you. Most or all mental health disorders, really, quite surprisingly. And some companies are still using those metrics. I would say most academic research sites are. But yeah, the question is, can you actually get close to that using stuff like EEG, measuring the electrical activity of a person's brain to get at whether they're having a profound experience? I would say we're not even close to getting there yet. So if you want to make it really objective, I have a lot of doubts on that, even as a scientist that's like advising companies in the space. But with questionnaires and measuring, I really think that's good enough. I think that's good enough for the FDA at the very least.
We have
Yeah.
the GAD-7 and PHQ-9, which are subjective. Like that's our standard for SSRIs, like how or the HAM-D. All these scales have a little bit of subjectivity to them.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. And then what about kind of the spiritual experience? Do you feel like obviously we already have like thousands of years of, I'm calling it institutionalized medicine because there's whole
Mm.
cultures that have this ingrained in their culture, this medicine ingrained in their culture. Do you think that having these medicines available through the pharmaceutical industry is going to impact these? I'm just like trying to
Yeah.
figure out, where does the traditional medicine plus a regulated industry that we're seeing now that kind of is a hybrid of the two, plus then more traditional medicine, and how these are all going to play and how they might impact one another in the future. Do you have any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Like,
Justin, I really think that the medical model, there's no way it could possibly replace an authentic experience in the way that an indigenous community can supply, or even a drum circle at Burning Man, right? There's some certain quality of those that can never be replicated in a clinical setting. And so I feel, and our organization really gets behind this too, you must have a blend of the different roles. And to say that only the medical way is correct is difficult, right? We advocate for that way as the most immediate and the most practical way of getting these medicines out into the public in a safe way, right? But yeah, to recommend not engaging in an indigenous ceremonial quality, right? There's clear benefits to people who are willing to do the work required to embody those practices. And there is work required, right? It's not something that anybody can just jump into. Work with a shaman, do all the icaros and dieta, changing your diet for weeks on end and preparing for that, and intention setting. It's hard work. So I say both. Colby, what do you think?
I don't know if I have much to add to that. I don't want to take away from people that are practicing indigenous settings. Certainly, I believe they have a right to access it in America. But I think there is truth that the medical model, what I worry about, I guess, with unregulated setting is someone getting hurt by a particular practitioner that is not following best practices and doing what they're supposed to. And without a framework to protect the user, I think there generates a lot of risk. And I think in our profession, we're a little bit more risk averse. That's why we become pharmacists, all about the safety
Oh
over
boy.
everything. So, from a holistic approach, it's hard to argue against a regulated model just to ensure patient safety. I wish every person was ethical, but we know that's not necessarily the case.
True. There are many bad actors.
yeah, I mean, there's always the fear, like even in cannabis, when as cannabis starts to get more normalized and destigmatized, and we're moving into like Schedule 3 versus Schedule 1, 2, which it should, I think personally, just be decriminalized would be good. But then like people are like, oh, we don't want that because then the pharmaceutical companies are going to come in and do that. And obviously not. That's the cannabis industry is
Yeah.
different than this, where it's much more dynamic from my perspective. And then
Mm.
we've got psychedelics, which are not something that people do as frequently as cannabis. I think that there are definitely recreational components to it, but my personal experience has been there's definitely health benefits to it, like mental health
Mhm.
benefits to it.
Potentially physical for gut health, for TBI. There's a lot of,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I think that the fear of the pharmaceutical company coming in and trying to institutionalize psychedelics. And of course, there will always be the churches and that. But then now, like I always have to represent my clients. And so right now, my clients are people who are working in the regulated markets or very close to it in Oregon and in Colorado. And I think that they potentially have a more valid concern about the pharmaceutical companies coming in and lobbying the states to put more and more restrictions on the use of these substances, especially after being approved for prescriptions. Could you say anything to that, or
Yeah.
should we just give them
I,
more medicine?
I get worried about this. I do know that I think it was Utah. I have to confirm this, but so Compass Pathways, which we mentioned earlier, they're the closest to the clinic to approval when it comes to psychedelics in the drug development world for their psilocybin. And from my understanding, they've been advocating to states that are opening up these bills to only allow a use of their synthetic psilocybin for their bills. And so there's a huge distinction between just allowing their synthetic psilocybin or only allowing the synthetic psilocybin. No, I think most people would agree that allowing more options is good. It's going to reduce the price in the market at least, but requiring exclusivity for the FDA approved product is a monopoly, and that's a yeah, I get scared about that. I wouldn't want that. So, and basically, I'm saying like I think that states should strongly consider having both synthetic and natural psilocybin available to allow for a very diverse market and just yeah, more options.
Yeah, it's going to be more beneficial. Just like what comes to mind is like midwifery, like
Mm.
midwives,
Yeah.
like proven time and again it's proven to be a little more risky than
Mm.
being in a hospital setting, but as far as the experience of the mothers, the health of the babies,
Mm.
all sorts of benefits. Like midwives don't get paid that much. They really don't, but they put a lot of time and effort into what they do,
Yeah.
yet they get cock blocked wherever they go, practically. No, I shouldn't say that. But they
I know
get
what you mean.
blocked, and the institutions do it intentionally too. And this is a conspiracy, but it's not just a conspiracy. I know a group that were run out of business essentially here locally.
They've had to really fight for every single rights that they've
Every
been given
single
for, yeah,
thing.
they have been. Yeah.
Even the state has insurance, like can provide some level of insurance benefit, and that's like being. I don't know now. It's been a while, but anyway, I liken it to that. I liken it to that. Like there's a place for the medical model, and then there is a place for the natural medicine method. So hopefully what do you think? Do you think that I like to think, I'm an optimist, pathological optimist. I like to think that this is going to change traditional medicine versus
Hmm.
traditional medicine changing this.
Absolutely.
That's my hope.
That's a dream.
We all think traditional medicine, I would venture to say everyone in this organization probably thinks it needs to change. There's so much to say that is negative about our current healthcare system that the dream is maybe change traditional medicine, maybe our society. As we get closer to artificial intelligence, it feels like we need to find a way to rethink a different perspective on things, to rethink what does it mean to be human, what does it mean to have a career, and maybe that requires some experience that completely shakes up the snow globe and moves you out of the mindset you are now, because I think the future is going to look very different for healthcare as well as for society.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea is that maybe psychedelics can open people's minds to not only just what ails them and in a way that provokes them to change, just as Colby said, shaking up the snow globe, but also like our huge systems and the structures that are failing us as a society right now. Yeah. And you could easily go down the rabbit hole of psychedelics for human flourishing as like a woo thing, but I really think there's something to it. There's all these certain values that get caught up in breaking down these ingrained behavior structures that we have and moving towards making a society that's more pleasant to live in, less harmful and traumatic, and stealing all of our attention at every moment in space.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. We have a long way to go. The strange thing is that we clearly have a long way to go, but it seems like I have these conversations all the time. More of these kinds of conversations where we're like, hey, we know that something has to change and we have the answers and we can move forward, but yet, I don't know. I think I might be in a bubble. But hey, you guys, thank you so much, Colby and Kevin. That was really pleasant, very pleasant to talk to you guys about this stuff, geek out a little bit. And yeah, and I'll see you around. I'm so glad that the Psychedelic Pharmacists Association is on the side of the medicine.
Yeah, I do want to say one more thing. We're definitely have some members who are exploring consulting with clinics. If you have a psilocybin service center or clinic that you help represent, screening for drug interactions is one thing. A lot of patients are on traditional antidepressants or mental health meds that want to try psilocybin. And knowing that's one thing, as us, we are perhaps best prepared to be able to critically evaluate those interactions.
Yeah, okay.
That's additional service some of our members are exploring, and we're exploring as an organization, kind of setting
We're
that up.
so on the bottom floor. I know I meet people who are in the underground, and like safety is a big component of what they do. They're available to go to parties and those kinds of things and keep people safe. But what is new is really this kind of this medicine in a regulated market where I think that would be an amazing service to just be able to have that kind of evaluation. If you've got a client who is trying to get off of SSRIs, it'd be really good to have a meeting with professionals, medical professionals, before they try to make any big moves like that. And so that's great. That's a great resource. All right. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Justin.